I have with me today Steven Hassan. Is that how you pronounce it?
You got it. Perfect.
I have Steven Hassan. Now, a lot of my audience knows Steven because I talk about his work fairly frequently on my channel. I appreciate you coming on and talking to me. What kind of things, what kind of projects do you have going on right now? What work are you doing at the moment?
Oh, at the moment, my project is the book for Simon and Schuster called "The Cult of Trump," and I think the subtitle is "A Leading Cult Expert Explains How the President Does Mind Control." Is the title that they wanted to put on it. The book is so much more than just that thing, but they thought that would be a good draw for people to
Right.
see the red cap and then want to pick it up and
Yeah.
look some.
I gave the book a read, actually. It was a fascinating read. Can you tell me a little bit about the book and about your process of writing it and what kinds of things you discovered while you were writing it? Like, tell me about it.
Sure. So I guess I'll start by saying I grew up 1.3 miles from Donald Trump in Flushing, Queens. He grew up in Jamaica Estates. And while I grew up in New York, I moved to Massachusetts in the mid '70s after my deprogramming out of the Moonies. But I was basically aware of him as a money person, and then later I looked at 10 minutes of an Apprentice show, which had no interest to me whatsoever. Um, and when you're involved with a malignant narcissist cult leader directly, as I was with Sun Myung Moon, um, when I came out of that trance and when I learned about cult leaders and brainwashing and mind control, I have an automatic antenna for malignant narcissists and especially other cult leaders. So the grandiosity, the I know what nobody else knows, the lack of empathy, the never taking responsibility, blaming everyone else, the sadism, the revenge, the threats, the projection of all of the shadow sides of people onto everybody else. So very early on, when he started announcing that he was going to run for president, and I watched some of the debates. I thought this is a dangerous person, and he was manipulating words and manipulating people in a way that nobody else was understanding. And it was evident to me that he was using manipulation and mind control type techniques. And then later, when he announced a total Muslim ban, I was deeply researching how ISIS was recruiting online. And I wrote a blog for the Huffington Post, something like "Donald Trump, ISIS's greatest recruiter," because after his announcement, people would be flocking to get into Islamic extremist groups for fear that they were going to be persecuted um, by potentially a presidential candidate. Um, then later in March of 2018, I was interviewed by Chauncey DeBega for a Salon piece. And I basically talked about the stereotypical profile of a cult leader and how Donald Trump fit that to a T. And that led to meeting an agent, a book agent, who said, "I'd like you to do a book called The Cult of Trump." And I automatically winced. I laughed and then I winced because my normal approach isn't to just take on a particular cult. It's to talk more generally
Sure.
about psychology and use lots of stories about lots of different groups. But I truly, feel and believe that, having been raised Jewish, educated about the Holocaust, then getting into a mind control cult run by a deluded, messianic, malignant narcissist, and then seeing the most powerful office in the world being occupied by such a person, I felt like it was my no-brainer, so to speak, that I had to do something about it. And so all I had when I agreed to do the book was this knowledge, this 40-year knowledge about cults and mind control, and about how he was a stereotypical profile of a cult leader, and the black and white, all or nothing thinking, demanding loyalty and obedience, the fear of the outsiders, the build the wall, lock her up. I had those pieces, but once I started doing the deep dive and the research, I realized there really are cults in the cult of Trump. Like
Like
the
full-blown
base are,
legitimate cults.
from my point of view, full-blown destructive cults.
Hmm.
See, I have an influence continuum, as you know, that talks about ethical influence and
Yeah.
unethical influence. And so in my way of thinking of things, there are basically beneficial cults where you can be really into something, a rock star, sport, whatever, but that you're free to think for yourself. You're free to have your own conscience. You're free to question. You're free to exit without any penalty or any threats of anyone coming after you. Destructive cults, it's a one-way trap. You get deceived into accepting beliefs, and it gets deeper and deeper, and then they're programming a whole new identity that's actually dependent and obedient on the leader in the group. And I didn't put the pieces together between this cult called the Family or the Fellowship that was founded by Abram Baridi 80 years ago, the ones that created the National Prayer Breakfast, and Moon, and Trump. So that was
Didn't connect the dots on that
revelatory.
originally, right?
And for your listeners who haven't read Jeffrey Sherlett's two excellent books on this cult, but you have Netflix, I would go to see the docu-series on Netflix called The Family. And I wrote a blog about how Moon was brought from the family's meeting to meet Richard Nixon during his impeachment. And the Moonies were told God wanted Nixon to be president, and we were sent out to fast and to demonstrate for Nixon, making it look like they were just basic American citizens who just loved their president. And what the base that the media is calling mainline evangelical Christians, they're not mainline evangelical Christians. Many of them are what's referred to as dominionists.
Hmm.
Have you ever heard that term?
I don't believe that I have, no.
So dominionism is to Christianity what Wahhabism is to Islam.
Okay.
It is a theology, so to speak, but it's not mainstream, and it's not believed by most people. But so, for example, mainline Christians say Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world," or it's as you do to the lowest, you do it to me. Feed the poor, help the downtrodden, etc. Further, he would say, well, it's harder for a wealthy person to go to the kingdom of heaven, right? The camel in the eye of the needle, so to speak. Dominionists want power and money and elites. The wealthier, the better. If you're a murderous dictator, but you're part of their team, they're all for it.
And we see them supporting Trump. We see this smaller group.
Michael Pence is a member of the family. He was recruited by Chuck Colson, who was a Watergate plumber for Nixon. And I should say the family doesn't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. They just want to influence you. And it's I should also say it was kind of invented during the height of the Cold War, where the fear was communist takeover, of atheism, and therefore we need a Jesus alternative.
Right.
So we'll brainwash for Jesus as an alternative to brainwashing from Chinese communism or Soviet communism. But I learned about, and then Pence was put in charge of the transition team when Christie was kicked out. Pence was in charge of bringing in people into the cabinet, and it's the most religious cabinet. They have Bible studies every week with a guy named Ralph Drollinger of Capital Ministries, and that's another piece of the story. Then I learned about Opus Dei and how William Barr and Leonard Leo, who's been feeding all of these judge appointment names, are Opus Dei, which is a Catholic right-wing group that I've helped people get out of.
Would you call that one a cult? I've actually talked about that in the
Yeah,
past. Yeah.
yeah, I actually have a really interesting interview I did with an ex-Opus Dei member on my website, and we did the bite model and applied it to Opus Dei. And then there's a group of different people and churches and mega churches that are called New Apostolic Reformation.
Mm.
And these folks, basically, the leader claims to be an apostle or a prophet. They claim to get direct revelations from God, and they're very demon and Satan focused. So they're going to help exorcise demons from people. They're going to cast them out. They're going to do faith healings. They often speak in tongues, but they demand absolute obedience and loyalty. Otherwise, satanic entities are going to get to you.
Right. That
And
makes sense.
what I've learned about the New Apostolic Reformation is they're very high tech, they're very wealthy, and their members are told that they're spiritual warriors. And then there's at least 10 million Americans who are in it, somewhere around 350 to 400 million worldwide, who are in this collection of people who think these are the last days, etc. Many of them are prosperity ministers, I might add.
Right.
So
Like
if you
the TV
give over,
evangelicals type of people.
right, well, give over all your money, God will bless you. Even if you have to put it on your credit card, you're already in debt.
Right.
God's going to bless you, and so take advantage of people. Then I talk about the libertarians, of course, Scientology, the Moonies, and other cults support Trump. My former cult has a gun factory,
Mm.
so they're very pro NRA and gun violence preparation. Um, so the idea is essentially the thesis in my book is that there's a lot of these powerful people influencing Trump
Hmm.
to influence policy, which is why they're using him. But they're also cult members who are following their leaders to vote for him and campaign for him and troll for him. I left out Vladimir Putin, but I added him to one of the forces that I believe is influencing many of his policy decisions and actions.
That's extremely fascinating. And like I said, the book was really good. I read it cover to cover. And on that note, so you are the inventor of the bite model. You wrote the bite model, basically. Would you mind giving the audience just a little bit of a primer on what it is exactly, and then we can take a look at what points on the bite model Trump meets.
Sure. So first, I want to just say that the models that helped me get out of the Moonies, I attribute to Robert J. Lifton and Margaret Singer, Edgar Schein, Lewis West, and each of them had a different way of describing Chinese thought reform or brainwashing. But as I was studying psychology, I read a book by Leon Festinger about a apocalyptic cult in his book When Prophecies Fail. And he helped come up with something called the cognitive dissonance theory. And he said that humans have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and that these three things, we like to have consistency between the three. So if you can make one of them change, the other two will shift to reduce dissonance. So if you change someone's behavior, you can get their beliefs to change and their feelings to change. Or if you can change someone's belief, it will change their behavior and their feelings, etc. And I started thinking about those three areas and then kind of using it as a filter over all of the other models of mind control. And I realized that a lot of the behaviors could fall under these three categories, except for one, which I called information control. So in my original 1988 book, Combating Cult Mind Control, I wrote about these four components of control. But it wasn't until after the book came out that a friend of mine, who was actually a minister, said, you know, if you change the order, you can then take the first letter
The
and
acronym.
call it the BITE model. So, and his name is Buddy Martin. So I want to do a shout out to Buddy for making that suggestion, because it, in fact, makes it easier for people to understand it. So very briefly, the B of the BITE model stands for behavior control. So if you control people's sleep, and Americans are chronically sleep deprived, and people who are in the White House and in the administration, I am told, are even more sleep deprived. You're not able to think clearly and analytically. And that's a really important mind control technique. But if you have clothing regulations, food regulations, strict rules of behavior control, who you can talk to, who you can't talk to, rewards and punishments, rewarding behaviors they like, punishing you if not. There's a whole list, and I have this on my freedomofmind.com website, as well as in every single one of my books, all of the behavior control variables. The most important of all the behavior control variables is instilling dependency and obedience to an outside authority figure or an ideology. The I is information control, and all destructive cults don't let people have informed consent. So they either lie by holding back critical information, distorting information, or outright lying. And once you get into the cult, they keep lying to you. So it's a critical part of maintaining that totalist ideology of the group, is telling lies. They will also, under information control, they will find out details about your past and use it to manipulate members. They'll have people spying on each other. There's often a need to know within a destructive cult where one part doesn't know what the other part knows. And certainly as you go up the pyramid, fewer and fewer people know a bigger picture. And so there's a whole list of information control variables. Then we have thought control variables, and that is the ideology is the truth with a capital T. It's scientific. You have to believe it, even though it's not scientific and it's not the truth. People are indoctrinated to think it's the truth and to think there's something wrong with them if they can't agree with all of the points that they're being taught. And the ideology is black and white, all or nothing, good versus evil, us versus them. Very formulaic. Under thought control, there's also thought stopping techniques that members are taught. So in my former cult, because it was very Satan and demon oriented, I was taught to chant in my head to get rid of negative spirits, etc. Different cults have different techniques, but the idea is, and that you can't have a critical thought against the leader, the doctrine, or the group. So you have to get rid of it. And then there's a technique that Lifton wrote about, one of his 8 criteria that's really important, especially in talking about Trump, is Lifton called it the loaded language, which is the thought terminating cliches, things that capture your attention and your imagination and just shut things down. So for example, if somebody says, oh, Trump was caught, on a saying that he lied, about X. Trump will say fake news, fake news. The media is the enemy of the people, and not address the actual substance or
Right.
listen to the actual tape of what he said versus the facts to show that he was lying.
So that's a clear
Uh,
example of some way in which Trump meets points, at least
yeah,
one, that specific point.
exactly. Build the wall, lock her up, Pocahontas, all kinds of thought terminating words that make you unable to think analytically and go, wait a minute, this is a this is a professor. This is a human being
Exactly.
who's well regarded and respect. No, fake news. Uh,
Dehumanizing, it seems. He seems to be dehumanizing people a lot.
Oh, that's part of the ideology of a mind control group is you have the insiders who deserve to exist and the outsiders who don't deserve to exist. And that was
Right.
Lifton's dispensing of existence criteria. But on the thought control, really, people are in a constrained box of ideology where they can't take other people's perspectives because they're made to feel like bad things will happen to them if they start thinking differently.
Right.
And that gets to the emotional control, the E of the bite model, which is on the one hand making people feel special and elite and part of the chosen. But on the other hand, a lot of what is going on is guilt and fear manipulation. And for me, the universal mind control technique is is phobia indoctrination or phobia installation, where in your mind you can't imagine leaving the group and being happy and fulfilled, or you can't imagine ever betraying the Messiah or the
Right.
president of the United States, because only bad things will happen to you. And of course, as an ex-witness, as an ex-Moonie, we were told in our groups that ex-members are bad,
Yeah.
stay away from those apostates. They're really, low energy, and
Yeah.
it's better for a dog to eat its vomit and all this other like really graphic negative stuff. So if you're in a mindset where you can't imagine a choice that's positive, you're stuck. You can't think your way out of the box because you're using their language, their beliefs. You're surrounded by other people who are constantly reinforcing. Oh yeah, another big part, as you know, in the witnesses is threat of disfellowshipping. That
Hmm.
if you question the group, everyone will shun you and want nothing to do with you, your mother, your sister, your brother, etc. And that's huge, forceful social control. But in my model, the more a group uses all four things to create a pseudo identity that's dependent and obedient on the leadership of the group or the ideology, the more destructive a cult it is. And when you see people like right now in the United States, the Republicans are all voting no impeachment, and that they're saying he didn't do anything wrong, even though it was blatantly
Right.
wrong.
It's out there. Everybody can see it. But somehow people seem to be avoiding the facts of it. They're just shutting it out and
Well,
ignoring it.
they're doing thought stopping, and their sources of information are only reinforcing the narrative that the Trump people want people to believe. But if anyone just stops and says to themselves, if I make a new friend and I find out that friend is a liar, that they made up a whole story about their past, or and that they're actually a criminal, why would you want to have a relationship? Why would you invite that
Right.
person into your house or give them power over the finances that you have or the country has? But that's like common sense and logical.
Right. That makes complete sense.
Hmm.
We're coming close to the end of our time, so I just wanted to ask you a couple of softball questions. I always have a softball question. Um, What do you do outside of this job? What do you do to relax? How do you kind of disconnect from the stress of everything?
Well, I'm a big fan of meditation. I do self-hypnosis. I listen to tapes I make up for myself, like relax, Steve, breathe, be in your body. I like to work out, and I have a trainer that I have 2 sessions a week with. I'm married for 20 years, have a son who's turning 17, so that takes up a lot of my time. I'm also a member for the last 21 years of a Jewish a spiritual community in Brookline, Massachusetts called Temple Beth Zion. And I like to study Torah. I like to go to services. I like to do social justice things. I like to go to movies, plays, sports, and my passion is scuba diving.
Very cool. That sounds really good because I know sometimes with me, with the work that I put in and everything, it's really hard to face this stuff every day. So you got to have a way to unwind and separate yourself from it for a little bit to keep your sanity, honestly. So I'm really glad
Right?
to hear about that. And one more thing I wanted to ask you if by chance or if by chance people haven't heard of you or your work, where can we find your work? Where can we find the bite model and the book and things like that?
Yeah, the central place is my website, freedomofmind.com. I have a nonprofit, freedomfromundoinfluence.org, because I'm also in my spare time doing a doctoral program because I want to help develop the bite model, if I can, to be a tool that the legal system can use to evaluate whether a group is doing harmful psychological and social influence on people. So that I have a YouTube, I'm on social media, I've written 4 books now, I have I think 200 free videos up, but my blogs are really worthwhile, especially if you're a former member. We have the bite model applied to the Watchtower, Scientology, the Mormons, and Opus Dei at this point, and we're looking to expand and get more
Very
people
cool.
to know
Very
about.
cool. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I really hope you continue to do it, and we'll work together and hopefully make this world a better place for people, so that we don't have as
That's
many
what we
cult
want to
members.
do is
Right.
is is not demonize the other. Don't say bad things about people who believe in Trump. I was a total moon fanatic, but there's hope, and people can realize, hey, they lied to me, and I accepted all these beliefs and did all these things, but now I know more, and exit.
Exactly. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. It's been
Thanks.
fascinating, and hopefully we'll talk again one of these days, okay?
Great. Thanks so much, Owen.
All
Take
right.
care now.
You too.
Bye, everybody.